1, 2, 3, 4.
Welcome back to another Cops Mentality podcast with your hosts, Chris, Angel, and Matthias. Today, what are we talking about today, boys?
We're talking about your story.
Talking about my story.
Your story.
Oh,
Your story.
boy.
We're getting into everybody's stories
Here
here.
we go. So that's what we're going to do, right? We're going to kind of go through, give the listeners kind of an insight more into us.
Who we are, what we've been through.
Why we started, which I know the first episode we kind of touched on, why we decided to start this podcast, what the ideas behind it. But I think we all felt, especially yesterday, we had almost an hour-long conversation about what we really wanted to get out of this. And we felt that we needed to be a little more open just about us so that the viewers and listeners and anybody else that's viewing can feel a little more connected to us and why we're doing this whole podcast, right?
Yeah, no, I feel like a lot of people were saying, hey, we want authentic. We want, the authenticity behind people. I know the first episode I said something along the lines that I don't want to hear the positivity. I don't want to hear like the breakdown. I don't want to hear like, oh, how my life is perfect. I want to hear the struggle. I want to hear the hard times. I want to hear essentially like how you got out of that, because I know that, I've heard both of your stories, and I think that the public, that not just law enforcement or veterans are going to benefit from it. You guys are both also fathers. You're both also in law enforcement, Angel being in the military. There's a lot of hats to be worn, and you listen to people. And again, I don't want to be the source of somebody's, success. I want to just be a reason somebody changed the way they were doing something, right? Maybe breaking some kind of bad habit, for example, maybe yelling at their spouse, yelling at their kids, involving alcohol with everything they do. Why? Because it's a coping mechanism. And I'm sure that you'll get into that too. But, how do we eliminate the alcohol and use more of a healthier alternative, like maybe the gym, right? Maybe music. Everybody's got to do a different thing. I've learned that a lot, in the last couple of years. So I'm really looking forward to hearing your stories too,
And excited. And like we were saying yesterday, actually, with the conversation that we were having, if anybody that's listening feels a little triggered by anything that we're saying, just walk away for a little bit, turn it off, walk away and, reset yourself. We're going to be talking about some heavy topics and not necessarily our personal stories, but whoever else wants to share their stories, there might be some heavy stuff in there. And if you are not feeling too well while listening to us, just again, turn it off, walk away, get a little reset, come back, listen to us. If that's not the episode that you want to listen to, skip that episode, come back to the next one, and hopefully that'll be a better episode.
Yeah.
Hit that fast forward button.
Correct.
Once or twice.
No, exactly. And the reason why you said that too is I'll touch base on the trigger thing too is, with today's stigma with mental health, we talk about triggers all the time. Oh, he's triggered. Oh, she's triggered. And you almost want to make fun of that person, like, oh, this person's triggered. But that's not the reality. The reality is that triggers are nothing more than attention getters, right? When I hear the word suicide for me, it's kind of like, oh, I'm attentive. What happened? Because I'm like the Mr. Why. Why did it happen? Why did they do it? I always want an answer. Unfortunately, we're not going to get one. So the trigger is kind of the attention getter. If there's something you hear in the story, right, maybe of the injury, maybe the details behind the trauma, again, it's okay to feel, a little bit of your heart speeding up. It's okay to feel that like knot in your stomach. It's okay to feel a little bit of the sweats or lightheadedness coming on. Those are all, side effects of stress, right? And until we started really talking about these side effects of stress and anxiety, in my perspective at least, it started answering a lot of the stuff that I was going through. I was like, man, why am I always sweating? Why am I always wiping my nose? My mom's like, oh, you're just like a cute little dog,
That's your little tick.
Yeah, that's a warm nose. That's my thing, and I got a wet nose. So my mom would always tell me, like, oh, you're just warm. You're just always happy. So I always took it as that. But then I realized.
Did you wag your tail too?
not my tail, I didn't. But it's funny how, growing up, a lot of those things are important. You see how my mom knew what was going on. She saw that I recognized something was going on. Why? She says that I'm a high-strung kid. You know, I was always like, you know, talking fast and all those things. And then you don't realize what they mean until later on when you start studying the body, stress, how to alleviate some of those factors. So when you do all these breathing exercises you read about, meditate, you know, find your peace, the sweats go away.
So I want to just interrupt you for a second because we hit on a big thing that I know Jen and I speak about. For those of you who don't know, Jen's my wife. About
The wife.
Hi, Jen.
Hi, Jen.
the kids. Were you taught how to A, identify these things as a child, and B, how to cope with these things?
No.
Were you?
No.
Me neither. And this is one of the things where now the three of us are sitting here. We've been able to communicate purely with each other with a lot of things. But even our parents, my dad would never went to his buddies and said, "Hey, I'm feeling this sort of way." Right? It was almost like you bury it, you shut up, you just deal with it. It is what it is. And you know, they had their coping mechanisms. A lot of people, especially that age, was either outbursts or cheating or alcohol or drugs or abstinence from the family, things like that, right? Not healthy coping mechanisms. So now, like Matthias, you just said, you're doing research of, okay, how do I make myself better? How do I deal with these things? Which is something that we're going to try and touch on for people is, hey, like, hey, it's okay to not be okay.
Yeah.
It's okay to feel these things. It's okay. You're going to be okay. Don't ignore them. Try and find ways that can help you. And we're going to try throughout this podcast series, you'll hear people's stories, you'll hear their coping mechanisms, and you may find something like, oh shit, I want to try that. Or, hey, that may not work for me. And that's okay.
But it's like we've been talking about how it wasn't and I say the cool thing, but it wasn't the cool thing to talk about mental health. Like that wasn't back when we were growing up, like mental health wasn't a thing, and it was a thing. It was just not.
You're a pussy if you try to talk about your feelings or say, "Hey, I'm not okay with this." Everyone like Matthias, you got made fun of, or you got bullied, or whatever else for.
Correct. Mental health. So mental health is not something that anybody wanted to talk about. Nobody even wanted to touch on the conversation of mental health. You were either mentally challenged, like completely full mentally challenged, or you were just completely normal. So like there was no in between. There was like nobody ever spoke about anxiety. Nobody ever spoke about depression. Nobody ever spoke about PTSD. And probably why we have so many homeless veterans nowadays, because that wasn't a thing back in the day. So when people used to come back from war, nobody knew what was happening with those people. You know, they were just coping with whatever they were coping with, but they didn't know how to deal with it because they didn't know what there was.
Two things. Like think about the things, the knowledge that we've kind of gained throughout the years, right? So all three of us love the gym to a certain degree, right?
I know about looking at my body, but I do enjoy the gym.
we enjoy the gym. We enjoy jiu-jitsu. I'm just trying out CrossFit for the first time and being, you know, actually devoted to it rather than going, this sucks, I'm out. You know, you're using the excuses, right? Oh, I'm going to get an injury. Everybody gets injured. You don't know what you're doing. No, I'm just like lying to myself because I didn't want to push. But think about the abilities that we have once we gain the knowledge in the gym, right? All three of us were probably at one point in our lives where we're like, we want to get into the gym because we want to look better. Eventually became like, oh, I feel good because of all the, you know, all of the chemicals that are being released, the endorphins, serotonin, and all that stuff, right? But again, you didn't probably know about that. You know about it now. You didn't know, oh, I'm going to the gym to increase my endorphins.
Yeah.
You know, you didn't do that. So think about the amount of time and the years that we put into jiu-jitsu, in the gym, in the military, law enforcement, to create these physical habits, yet we expected our minds to be on autopilot, right? And the other day I saw something on Instagram, and again, take it for what it's worth. I don't agree with everything I see on social media. I think a lot of us are kind of falling back to like, oh, it's on social media, it's got to be true.
Yep.
You know, and it's just people putting it on.
Actually, it's the complete opposite. It's on social media. It must be a freaking lie.
Right,
That's
exactly.
the way I see it.
But I saw this, and I completely agree with you, and I think that I agree with it, and I think you guys would too. It says our men are being raised by video games and TikTok, and we wonder why they're still little boys at 25. Right?
What did I say to that?
I mean, I'll tell you what I said.
What did I say to that, Matt? When you posted it, what did I say to that?
You laughed because you said, wow, you must be still 25. You're playing video games for 5 hours. And it's funny because, again, we can talk. It's good, right? We can laugh about it because we know, right, that we all play video games. but that's also a coping mechanism, which we can get into later. You know, that's kind of how we release the stress. And we didn't really realize that because we're just kind of enjoying it, you know. But then when you realize you have bad days and good days, and today was a good day, why was it a good day? Well, I went to the gym. I ate a pretty healthy meal.
I thought it was because Ice Cube said it.
Hey, Ice
It
Cube,
was a good day.
you know, what Angel would know. Maybe I played video games with my boys, and I had a great chat while I was getting 15 mercs.
Except when you're playing Call of Duty and you want to throw your controller.
This is true.
And that's the thing. I told you guys on the first episode, and we cut that out, that when I was playing Call of Duty, and I haven't played in about a year, maybe a year and a half now, but when I used to play Call of Duty, I remember getting home and sitting down and starting to play, and my wife would be like, "How is this stress relieving to you?" I go, "What do you mean?" She's like, "You're screaming at the TV, you cursing somebody out. Like, how does this feel good for you?" And I was like, "I don't know. It makes me feel amazing. I'm freaking telling somebody to go F themselves, whatever it is." Like, I was just like, "Fuck you, no, fuck you too." Like, and we're going off on this chat. And my wife's like, how is this healthy? Like, how do you find joy in this? I was like, oh, you have no idea how much joy I find in killing people online and telling them to go fuck themselves. Like, this is amazing. I love this shit. I used to get a rise out of that.
At the end of the game, hey, good job, man.
Good game, bro.
Except for Jonathan. Jonathan's getting reamed out for having one kill.
Jonathan just gets offline over here. So.
Poor Jonathan.
That's too funny.
So yeah, I think this is a good, transitional point, Chris, to talk about how maybe you have learned throughout the years how to recognize yourself, how to recognize those difficult moments, right? Whether it's in your relationship, whether it's with your children, whether it's with work, and how did you learn to identify it? Because I think that is kind of what we're doing now, right? Raising awareness and normalizing. And when I say normalizing, I mean something that's typical, right? For a typical person to come home for the longest time is like, Lucy, I'm home. Like that show is like everything's supposed to be nice and good, but you had a rough day at work. The dogs are barking. One of them just peed on the floor. Your kid dropped off the backpack and left the shoes in the middle of the hallway.
I'm going to that right now.
Dinner's not
on the floor this morning. They dumped a bottle of bubbles all over the floor. I'm like, what's happening?
Teddy peed on the floor like 10 times yesterday, and I counted about 10 times.
Yeah, I mean, he's a puppy.
That is so crazy.
He's a puppy, but how would have been so different 5 years ago when you would have been coming home from that stressful day, and now you're like losing your lid, versus now where you go, hey, it's not worth me raising my blood pressure.
Yep.
It's not worth me stressing it out. We can get into later on if you'd like maybe what I didn't know about intrusive thoughts, right? What are intrusive thoughts and how do they pop into your mind? Like maybe like, oh, I just want to strangle the dog. You're not going to strangle the dog,
right.
But it's normal to have these thoughts that come in when you're stressed, when you're upset. Oh, the guy that cut you off. Let's be real. If somebody cut you off, you're like, I want to just ram them. I want to run them off the road.
I want to destroy them. Pull over. I'm going to fuck you up.
Whatever,
But
you don't do those things, right? So we have to understand how that works. How did that all start for you?
So back at Binghamton, actually, it's probably the first time I had some sort of realization just with how I held on to things, right? I was a very passionate kid. I was a goalkeeper, Division I.
You're still passionate, by the way.
Still passionate.
Yeah. Just not a kid anymore.
Jen would say different. But,
yeah. I think my mom would say the same thing.
When I would get scored on in practice, I hated it because I was a perfectionist. Trained very hard. I hated getting scored on, right? Obviously, you're a goalkeeper, your job is to keep the ball out of the goal.
When the ball hits your face, your arms.
I would instantly get inside my own head. And then you know what would happen? Another mistake. My coach at the time, John Scott, Scottish guy, he actually played for Liverpool. Lovely guy. He walked over to me and he goes, Chris, I go, what's up, Jono? He goes, you got to let it go. I looked at him, I go, yeah, thanks for that. Appreciate it. He goes, think of it this way. At the beginning of practice, you're carrying a ball bag on your back. There's no balls in the ball bag. I go, okay. He goes, you get scored on, you make a mistake, add a ball. Now add another one. Every mistake, add another ball. He goes, sooner or later, you're not going to be able to move. You got to learn to not let the ball bag or the ball into the ball bag. You got to learn to let it go. And I sat there and I was like, fuck, that would suck. That'd be super hard to move. And he actually made me do it one day. He made me put it on the ball bag. And every time I made a mistake, I tried to dive. It was just almost like Free Willy kind of flopping over. Right? I was like, John, I can't do this. but now you understand. He
Yeah.
goes, now he took everything out. I
You're
made a
free
good
moving.
save. I can move. I'm like, oh, I hate you. So that was one of the biggest eye openings to me, was how I hold on to my own mistakes.
Yeah.
I always kind of punished myself as a kid. Like, if I made a mistake, I need to do more. I need to do more. I need to do more. Mistakes aren't okay. Mistakes aren't okay. Mistakes aren't okay, which is wrong. And so my senior year, actually, John said he moved to a different college, but I heard him say it to one of his players when we were playing, or I went to go watch because he would coach back in my hometown. Told one of his players, he goes, don't be afraid to make a mistake. At a high level, telling a player that, don't be afraid to make the mistake. It's all right. And his teammates said, we got your back. I'm like, holy shit. Like, why does nobody ever say that? I never heard that. It's like, my parents weren't like, you need to be perfect by any means. My parents were great in that realm. Like, they supported me, but I wasn't told, hey, mistakes are okay.
Yeah.
Mistakes are okay. And I was like, motherfucker. That was good to know. So, fast forward to your question, nowadays, I really have to attest a lot of it to Jen. She bombards me with Instagram posts of parenting and everything else daily.
The gentle parenting.
The gentle parenting.
I was gonna send you one this morning.
And at first, and this goes into mentality with work as well. At first, I'm like, God damn it, this is the exact opposite of what I'm used to. I was used to, if you're not in the car 15 minutes early before we leave, you're late. So I was always, anytime we went somewhere, so I'm like, hey, we need to go. Like, there's 10 to 15 minutes before we're supposed to leave. Why are you still packing? I would let that affect me. The reason being, that's what I saw. I would see my dad get so high strung and so upset. As a kid, you were like, oh, that's how I need to be. So if it doesn't go my way, but you're not following that rule, well, then that's what I'm going to be. And it was learning that's not how you have to be, right? You can control.
So you're reprogramming yourself, correct?
And that was one of the things that really Jen made me see through these 9 million Instagram messages that she sends me is, and actually her and I have had a lot of good talks about this, right? But it's you control how you react to something and what emotion you allow yourself to feel. And I would always say, no, that's bullshit. I got mad at something. It's okay that I got mad. Not wrong, but you can control not getting mad. You can control how you control it. And that word right there, the icing on the cake, is when I actually went to supervisor school at Nassau County. The guy came in, he goes, I'm going to do a class on perspective. I'm like, oh my God, half an hour till lunch. I'm hungry. I'm tired. It was the best 30-minute class in supervisor school that I took because it was all about perspective. The guy talks about how he had cancer. He overcame it. He beat it 3 times. And he goes, my perspective, he goes, I used to be the guy, I believe he was in the Army. He goes, I was the guy that whatever it was high strung, was pissed off. If I was late for work, motherfucker, I'm late for work. Now I'm in traffic. Now, and then you just go down.
It's a trickle effect.
Giant,
yeah, it's a spiral.
Twister. He goes, perspective. Yeah, you're late.
Do you notice how that always happens, by the way? You're running late something and you catch every red light.
Bad things come in 3,000s.
Well,
I don't say
that's
3s, 3,000.
Yeah, but that's correct. That's the problem. Is that when something's going bad, because of your attitude, now you're getting mad, and now because of getting mad, now everything seems to go wrong, and you're like, why the fuck is everything going wrong? Yeah. But it's because you're making it go wrong because of your attitude and because your outlook. And it's okay to be mad. It's how you react to being mad.
Energy, man. Energy. I'm telling you, I believe in that because all the people that talk about science,
what you put out.
Yeah, everybody talks about science, and I talk more about God, but a little combination of energy, which God and science can prove. It's everything. You have a bad attitude, you have a negative attitude towards whatever you're doing, you're gonna get a negative outcome.
Yep.
And
so that was one of the big things. I'm like, I was always the guy, and my wife hated it. We were actually driving home from upstate, right? We're on, I think, the Palisades. We only had Ollie at the time. He was in the backseat. This guy flies down the shoulder and stop dead traffic, almost hits the car. I react, right? I'm like, this motherfucker. I honk the horn. I give him the finger. Because that's, again, what I always saw the reactionary from my dad. I never thought about a different way of handling it. I was like, you pissed me off. You're going to know it. The guy almost hits the car twice and would have hit Ollie. And Jenna was like, she didn't blame me for it, right? She's like, what the fuck? But She was like, if you didn't react, maybe that wouldn't happen. And at first I took blame to that, right? I was like, well, how is it my fault? But then I actually did look back. I go, oh, you're right. If I didn't react to that, right? It's okay to feel like, wow, what a dickhead. But if I don't react to that situation, none of that happens. You know what I mean? It's one of those things where, again, changing your reactions, okay to be upset about it, but changing how you react changes the whole scenario. So, Angel, Matthias, back to your question earlier. Now when I come home, right, the boys do all this stuff. Perspective. She's a puppy. She peed on the floor. What are you going to do? It's a boy. It's a kid. They colored all over the wall, which happened the other day. Jen sent me a Snapchat, and there were, every color on the spectrum all over the living room walls and on the door. I laughed. You asked me that 2 years ago, would have been a completely different answer. Yeah. I laughed because I controlled, and I retaught myself, not everything is that serious, not everything is that bad, or listen, just some things you're going to have to roll with it. If you get mad at it, it's not going to make the situation change, but it's going to make the situation worse for you.
Let me ask you a question. So us being parents, right, and growing so much from our past and really learning a lot of these habits from our parents, would you say that you maybe blame your dad, your parents, your upbringing for who you are today? Or would you maybe say something else along the lines of, I thank them for the opportunity to see a different perspective?
I won't blame my dad or my parents for everything because they did the best they could. They didn't know, right? It wasn't like, hey, I'm going to teach this kid how to do it this way, right? It was an intentional, I'm going to teach this kid to be a bad person, then you could blame your parents, right? In this instance, absolutely not. My dad was a fantastic human being. I loved him. Are there things that I look back, I'm like, wow, man, cool. You fucked me up for that for a little bit. Yeah. But almost anybody can say that, right? Like, you can't blame me. My dad loved me and my sisters beyond everything. I think the way I think of it is it made me who I am, and I'm proud of who I am, and I'm proud of how my dad taught me who to be. And the resilience I have as a person is because of my dad. My dad and I would train every day after high school for 3 hours. The dedication he put into me, the confidence he taught in me, right? Like he taught me to be confident. The mindset he gave me all correlates with how I reacted to things. So everything's going to come with a positive and a negative. But now as you grow as a human, you have to look at it and say, okay, I may not like this negative. I need to change this negative. And that takes a big insight. You have to be able to look at yourself and say, how do I be a better human? Sometimes that comes.
Life is about learning. Life is about learning, right? Like I don't know that you can blame your parents or your dad because who can he blame? Because obviously he saw it from somewhere. Yep. Right. It's just a vicious cycle. You realize, thankfully, early enough that you didn't like certain things, and now you're working hard to change it.
Which makes
and that's
you
what
unique.
Life is about. It's about learning. You can never possibly think that you know it all. You always have to be open to learning new things. And then you self-identify, hey, this is what's wrong. This is what I don't like. How can I change it? So now you're taking steps to change that attitude or change that mentality or change that mindset or change how you react to certain things. So this is now you're being mindful about how you do things and how you say things and how you react to things.
100%. Yeah, a couple of weeks ago, Angel and I went to
the podcast in Yonkers.
That's what it was, Yonkers.
Yonkers.
We went all the way to Yonkers. We actually had some nice KFC too. That was good. That was a good day.
It was a dirty ass KFC, but it was good. It was delicious. Nice. It was delicious.
We met up with my boy Lito Gill. Big shout out to Lito Gill and our Jason Lacayo. He has his own podcast, and we'll talk about that in just a second. But he mentioned one thing. Absolutely loved it. He says, "Forgive yourself for not doing better when you didn't know better."
I fell in love with that quote right away. Did I not?
Dude.
I wrote it down right away. That hit home.
I'm reading it from my notes. I'm reading it from the notes because I was like, wow. That's kind of a big deal, and to me, that talks like a lot about the things that we're talking about. His podcast called Rooted Progress podcast. We could throw it up on the on ours, give him a big shout out. But when you don't know any better, how do you expect to have the answers? which is kind of like why we're bringing up this whole mental health awareness and conversation and let's talk about it. How the hell are you supposed to know what your parents taught you if you hadn't had a different way?
It's really going to be self-reflective, right? On these scenarios, and a lot of it you're going to see when you look back and you say, I was so mad. Typically what I do, and I do this at work all the time, after every single call, I will self-reflect. What could I have done better? How did I handle situations? Did I speak in the correct manner? Did I act in the correct way, right? So when you do these things and you look at yourself in that mind frame, that's how you're going to grow. A lot of people don't do that. They won't look at themselves. They won't look at the scenarios. They won't self-reflect and call themselves out on good and bad. Matthias just writes on the screen we have. This looks so damn good.
Oh my
Feet pics
God.
for days. Yeah, I'm barefoot right now. You'll see in the videos.
Feet finder.
So I actually have, the funny part is, right, I actually have on this big right toe right here, the one I'm moving it.
All
I don't want to hear it.
It's
A metal
I don't wanna
rod.
hear it. There's a metal plate. So my toe,
I don't want to hear it.
look at the video. My toe won't actually bend. So I have a toe boner 24/7, if you will. It just doesn't move.
It's too funny.
But anyways, that's how. People have to be able to call themselves out. They have to have the willfulness to self-reflect.
Hold yourself accountable.
Hold yourself accountable. That's right. Back to the quote, Matthias. I forget the exact phrasing of it, the one you had that you guys are obsessed with, which I do agree. I love that quote.
Grace for not doing better when you did no better.
So when I don't know how old I was. I was a kid. I talked back to my mom. Probably wasn't very nice because I was never. A lot of the stuff was like reactionary, right? Like you're a 12, 13-year-old kid. You're gonna talk back. You're gonna do whatever. My dad got mad, picked me up by the chin, and threw me into a wall, and screamed in my face. I remember a few times that was the reaction happened. So when Ollie was really young, I yelled at him and I looked at it and I said, "Holy fuck. That is not something I like that I just did." I said, I will never do that again. And it's something where I hated what it brought in me. I hated what it made me feel. And I looked at my son and I said, and he's a baby. This is for, that self-reflectiveness really kicked in. And I said, and that was one of the things I looked at him. I said, I will never speak to you again in that matter. I will never, which obviously he's young. He's not, but I was so frustrated. I just didn't know how to deal with, how do I deal with being frustrated? It was never taught to me.
Yeah.
But that was one of the things I had to learn was I didn't know any better. So I needed to give myself grace for not knowing any better, which I did. But I was also said, I still to this day is something that will not necessarily like haunt me, but it's something that I take very personally that I did that to my child. But this again, it's something that was done to me, so I didn't know.
But like you said, it's bringing it back now, bringing it back to the question that he asked you originally with, do you blame your dad or do you blame your parents?
No.
You can't. Why?
No.
Because they didn't know better, probably.
They didn't know better.
How can I blame them for not knowing better? Because now I know better.
How many
as a
things have
parent.
you done? How many things
Correct.
have you done
And
and
this
you've
is-
done and I've done up to this moment? And I'm going to talk about one that really bothers me. And I've lived with this for almost 10 years now with Tiana, because you're talking about with LJ. And I'm sure you could talk about, your daughters.
Hey, don't be mentioning my kids, all right?
Your kids are my nieces, so we got
Private property.
yeah, probably.
Go for it.
But hold on,
What
real
you
quick. Jen's gonna love this part. She's gonna smile when she hears this. If she listens to it, I don't know what she does.
She will.
every time.
She'll listen.
guarantee
she's
she
listening
will.
right now. She got you
Generational,
bugging.
Somehow.
generational cycle breaking. It's one of those new terms from the therapist. Everybody else, I'm like, God damn it, Jen, please stop.
Generational cycle
It's
breaking.
what it is. It's breaking the cycles of, this is why I don't blame my dad. Just like we all just said, it was taught before him and
Correct.
him, and every single generation has turned around and made slight changes. I didn't like that this happened, so I'm not going to do that. And now they just have a term for it, like to do everything else. But I think now it's more recognized of, hey, these actions, these effects of who we are, what we did, they have this effect on the child or whatever else. Which makes sense, right? More and more studies are going into everything. It's 2024, not 1990 when I popped out of my mama. So I think now the fact that we are so able to look back and make these changes, it's why they're so prevalent. Like this generational cycle breaking it is a thing. Like Ollie won't know. Ollie and LJ won't be the person I was when they were younger because I made the changes I made. Now they're still going to look back and they're still going to say, "Well, I didn't like that Dad did whatever
Correct.
or said," and that's fine.
I think that's a normal thing though for you to want to be better than your parents. And I
1000%.
tell my daughters that I tell my daughters, hey, I want you to be better than we were as parents.
1000%.
And I think we were great parents, right? We have already our first one in college. And for being first-time parents, I think we did phenomenal with her.
Absolutely.
Now Khaleesi's in college. Now we have another two that hopefully will be going to college at some point in due time. But I want them to be better than my wife and I were with them.
Yep.
And we've had our ups and downs as partners, but I want my kids to be better than we were. Whatever that means, whatever that better means. If it's better by not yelling at them when they do something wrong, by having their kids clean their room like they don't do right now, or whatever that means to them, like being better than we were as parents or than we are as parents. That's what it's about.
Yep.
And you want to be better than your parents, and not necessarily that they were bad parents, right? They were as good as they could be for you and your siblings. And so was my mom and my dad, as good as they could be for me and my siblings. Do I want to be better than my dad was? 1000%. And in what way? I guess I can share that in my own episode.
Yeah.
But I want to be better than my father was in certain ways. I think he was a phenomenal dad, but he had things that I didn't like.
Yep.
And I've changed that.
Yep. And that's what you have to do, right? You have to be able to look at almost any scenario and say, well, what do I want to change? Who do I want to be? Who do I want my kids to be? And then your kids to say and do the same exact thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah,
I could definitely tell you, a moment that I'm not proud of. That we're talking about children and coming up as a dad. And the first thing that I'll read to you is just a Bible verse that I like in Proverbs. It says, "A man who refuses to admit his mistakes can never be successful." We usually think of failure as something negative, but wise people know how to take advantage of it. They learn from it. They use it as an education. Failure is one of the most primary tools that God uses in your life to make you what he wants you to be. So Tiana's born, just a baby. Her mom had a C-section, so she was out for a little bit, and then she decided to go back to work, and I was pretty supportive of it. And I was like, oh, man, get to stay at home with the kid. Kid will be sleeping. I'll be playing Call of Duty, ordering a pizza, having fun. And I remember she was very, very, very colicky. Did not sleep at night. It was very difficult. And I give her mom a lot of credit for, being there and doing the best she could, as Tiana's growing up. And I remember one day she would not stop crying. Now, I've always been taught, no, don't leave the baby to cry. Just pick it up and soothe it. And, we'll talk about that in another episode.
Not it.
But yeah, well, let it, let it cry.
Jesus
Let it
Christ. Jesus Christ.
When we say let it cry, hey, is it a boy or a girl? Mine's a girl. All right, so let her cry.
It's not a it.
It's not a it. So
My
now
niece is not
I'm
me.
waiting for my daughter to stop crying. I pick her up, nothing. Change her diaper, nothing. I put her down, nothing. I try to feed her, nothing. Nothing is working. And as a young parent, I was 25 years old, staying at home, expecting, right? My expectation was that she would be at home and be a relaxed state and chill out. And she didn't. And she was just screaming at the top of her lungs. I just remember picking her up and just kind of vibrating her body because I was nervous. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to stop her from crying. I was like, what do I do? What am I supposed to do? And I'm just sitting here looking at her as she's got tears coming in her eyes. And I remember putting her down in the little bassinet area and walking away. And I called her mom and I was like, I can't do this. I cannot be here again with her for the rest of the day. I don't know how to handle this. I don't know how to calm her down.
Yeah.
I'm not a good parent. I was just negative self-talk. Looking back now, all I had to do was go, I love you. Daddy needs a little break. And I walk away. And that's it, and we'll go from that. TV.
Cut that
The Tiana. That's dramatic. Is that Tiana
was,
yelling at the background?
That was crazy. That was actually like on cue.
It's perfect. So I look back to that day and I could almost cry.
Yeah.
At the feeling that I have as a father now, looking at her healthy.
The self-disappointment in yourself.
The self-disappointment was kind of like, man, I should have known better. But it's how do you know better? You know, we talked about this earlier. How would I have known to just put her down, let her cry it out? It'll be okay. When I'm always like, my stomach hurts, I gotta go to the bathroom. I'm hungry, eat.
Were you ever taught when you get to that point how to try and deal with it?
There is not a manual on how to be a parent.
Not at all.
Well, no, just the emotion, right? Because that's even a part of mental health. It's part of emotions and the after effect they have on you. You got to that point. You were just so overloaded. Because I never was. That's why I took a big self-reflection. I was like, when I get to that point, I was never taught what to do with it. I was never taught how to express, how to admit I am struggling or I'm this frustrated or upset. I was never taught how to deal with it. It was just go deal with it. How? Can
we tie some of these loose ends real quick? This is your introduction, right? I want to hear. I want to hear your perspective real quick, and then obviously, Angel, I'd love to hear yours too.
On my episode,
would you say that we have very similar personalities, us three?
No, I don't like you guys.
Yeah.
All in all, would you say that we're pretty similar?
Yeah.
In most ways.
But we do handle things differently.
We do.
And again, that's because of our upbringing.
Right.
We all have different backgrounds.
Hold on. Let's not get sidetracked, right? Because I want to try to touch on something.
Don't tell me how to live my life, okay?
We're good at that.
we go into the military. We go into law enforcement, which we have similar backgrounds on that.
Yeah.
Would you say that maybe a big problem, maybe not even a problem, maybe just something that's been going on, let's call it culture. Would you say some of the culture in the military and law enforcement is we have a lot of the same mentalities, we have a lot of the same upbringings, we have a lot of the same personalities that we're joining the military at such a young age without learning all these coping mechanisms, without learning all these styles, which is why they think maybe law enforcement and military or any first responder has these weak ways of communicating, of showing their emotions, of do not cry. Like you said earlier, you're a pussy if you cry, you're a pussy if you talk about it. Like last time I heard it, and a female called me out on this, is a pussy's pretty strong. It pushes out a baby. So how do we ever figure out how to call people a pussy?
Well, talk about it.
Holy shit. She called me out and I was like, you're right. Actually, how am I calling somebody a pussy? Like, women
watching
big shout out.
I'm like, yeah, good luck. I'm not.
Oh my God.
I appreciate you. I can't do that.
I got so much love for women
that
out there.
Is so crazy right now. Talk about it.
Crazy.
Yes.
Holy
so
shit.
back to that, yes, because, and that's my point. I learned you express your anger by yelling, and that's what lets it out. In a way, yes, but there is such a better way to go about that, right?
But we don't know that. Let's not forget, we don't know any better, right? We're joining the police department. We got recruits right now who are 20 years old.
Right.
Who you are now versus when you were 20 years old, you have learned a lot.
No, but that's why I'm almost like
that's 20 years later.
That part where 100% agree. We're not, especially being cops, you're taught how to deal with the situation, but you weren't even before that portion. But I think it almost should be a part of the police academy.
But were you really taught how to deal with it?
No,
that's the thing. Like,
this is exactly what I want
they
to talk
go
about.
over, like I would say, the top.
Saying.
It's like they don't touch on how to actually handle situations.
Oh,
they don't know your personality. Your personality may
Yes.
not handle the situation the same way my
100%.
personality will handle it. So we are all different. So they touch on a generalized way of maybe handling a certain situation in a certain
walk up, talk
correct,
to them,
or de-escalate. Sometimes you can't de-escalate shit.
Right.
There is a lot that goes into, but yes, mentality and how you dealt with it and how you do.
If you
things.
remember, because we were all in the same class, all right, and some of us were paying attention a little bit more than others. Me and Angel were always in the remedial classes. Chris was always excited.
It was one time.
All right, we did it one time. But it felt like enough.
It was one time.
It was one too many.
And we got a 95 on that exam, but we needed to get 100, and I'm not going to say which one it is for liability purposes. I'm just saying it was one time.
Listen,
95 is a pretty goddamn good score.
how many
$95.
how many days, weeks, months, if you remember, is the PT program?
Oh God!
It was 3 times a week.
3, 4, maybe sometimes
For
5 times a
what,
week.
2 months? Two months, right?
Alternating.
3 months.
3 months total?
Yeah, 3 months.
I feel like it's the whole freaking time.
Because then it was breakout.
Well, there was times we had breakout, but I feel like, the
After
program,
breakout, we didn't do anything.
the PT, the DT programs and stuff like that. What I'm trying to say is take a lot of the program. Take up a lot of the time in the program, right? It's not weeks, it's months,
It's months.
right?
Yes.
How many days, weeks, and months do we focus on mental health?
I think we had 1 or 2 classes.
I don't remember
Maybe?
having any.
Again, it's just.
I think we had an instructor that his kid was going through some medical situation, and he would talk about it. And he would talk about it. He was
When we had downtime, he was
correct.
talking about it.
I don't remember anybody ever having that conversation with us back in 2016. And again, we're still talking about a time when talking about mental health wasn't a big thing yet. It is now becoming in the 2000s and 20s.
After
COVID is
really
when
it started
mental health
to be
has
like,
become to
maybe
be
we should talk about this.
correct.
Yeah, I'm going to tell you this. When we did this course in 2016, it was very minimal training, right? I'm
For
seeing
mental health, you
for
mean?
mental health.
Okay.
Now I'm seeing it increase and improve. So
After
we
COVID.
are after COVID, we are improving the mental health, right?
Correct.
And people are talking about it, which is why we're doing the podcast. But think about how many people, because remember what I said, right? When we first got out the department, or maybe a young career, 20, 21-year-old, how much have we learned in the last 3 years with CIT training, right? Or the mental health training with, personal physical disabilities, and then schizophrenia, manic depression, and all these things. We started talking about it so we can recognize some of these things. Mm-hmm. But imagine how many days we spend in this class versus how many months we focus on physical health. So why are we focusing so much on physical abilities and not so much mental? Physical abilities, I know, I'll call it 2 handfuls. 2 handful of people around 40 to 50 years old who can still keep the Cooper standards that we do now. I don't know that many cops right now that could sit down and have this conversation and go, I feel pretty good about the way I'm handling some of these calls.
Yeah.
So that and that's a huge issue. You know why? Because at the end of the day, once we leave the academy, actually during the academy as well, we stop PT. There's a certain point where we no longer did more physical stuff. Like everything was classroom, right? But then the mental health aspect, even though as a police officer, you don't necessarily have to stay fit once you get out of the academy. And that's a huge downfall. And I have always said we need to have at least a yearly PT test just to keep people honest and somewhat in shape, right? But the physical, the mental health aspect, we deal with that every day. We go to ADA calls every day. We go to suicidal calls every day. And I could tell you, they are very, very often.
Hangings.
Even
DOAs.
Even just getting screamed at for hours on end. There's takes a point I meant to you're like, either A, I'm a piece of shit because everyone fucking hates me in society, or B, you're just sitting there going, all I do is get fucking yelled at. Right? Your cortisol level is going to be high. Your cortisol level, let's just say it's usually for everyone else is at a 20 or 30. Ours is going to be at like 100 out of 150 because that's your baseline because you're so used to functioning at such a high stress level and you don't know how to cope or how to just talk to try to lower that level.
Because we're not mental health experts, how about we talk about ours, right? For example, what are some of the negative coping mechanisms that you deal with or that you do while you're responding to these calls, right? For example, I'll use mine, and I know you don't really do what I do, which is why I know you'll give me a different answer. Mine for the longest time was consuming so much caffeine that kept me at a level that was so high that I was operating like, hey, I'm wide awake and whatever else. In this past year, I've completely cut out caffeine, and I'm like, I'm a different person. Remember, I gave you that case of Monsters.
You gave me the case of Monsters, and I still have half of it.
I can't drink that shit.
Well, Monsters is the best. So compared to Red Bull, listen, I'm not here to get sponsored by anybody, but Monster, holla at me.
Listen, Monster, Red Bull, Celsius, C4, Bangs, you name it. I was working the midnights, 3 for 5. 3 for 5 bangs. I was like, whoop, here we go. Here goes one at like 10:30. Here goes one at 1 o'clock. No. All right, I got to get through this.
I do one, and that's it.
How does your heart?
Yeah, seriously.
Which is why I thought I was having heart attacks when I started dealing with anxiety and panic attacks.
Right.
Because I was like, I am consuming so much caffeine that it was like, okay, I have a caffeine here. We can relate to this in the military. We are drinking like Rippets, like they're water.
All the time.
All the time.
Rippets of caffeine.
Rippets of caffeine.
Overseas.
So now you're consuming so much caffeine. Everything is closed around 12 o'clock.
Yep.
You're getting Taco Bell. You're getting McDonald's.
Correct.
Wendy's.
Everything's horrible. There's nothing that's open that's healthy.
So unless
after
you're
midnight.
meal prepping, you're
Correct.
drinking bad caffeine. You were probably not drinking enough water because I was the guy that bought the fucking gallon of water. I never drink it because it's too heavy, and I'm like, I can't see it, so I need like a freaking glass little bottle, right? Which is what I use the
LED
Peloton
bottle.
ones. I use the little Peloton ones. They're like 8 ounces. I rip
Yeah.
the rubber thing off of it, and I just sip on that, and I refill it every 45 minutes. But me consuming so much caffeine caused me to believe, which it wasn't the case because I went and got what are they called, EKGs or whatever.
Uh-huh.
EKGs. They put a heart monitor on. They did this. They did that. They're like, dude, your heart's great. I'm like, it can't be great. It's pounding through my chest. They're like, well, how much caffeine you consume?
I'm dying, Doc. Save me.
And then it took me saying it out loud.
Wings coming out.
It took me saying it out loud to recognize how crazy this is. 2 Red Bulls, all right, or 2 Bangs. Each Bang is about 300 milligrams of caffeine.
Yep.
2 of those is 600 milligrams. I got out of the gym. What do you think I did?
Another one. Or did you take pre-workout?
I got pre-workout. How much is in most of the pre-workouts?
Oh, I don't fucking know.
Like 350, 400 milligrams of caffeine. Dude, I was pushing like 1,000 milligrams of caffeine, which they considered a drug. So how it is legal, and that is LE, not illegal, legal, how it's legal to be able to purchase this shit at the store and then consume enough caffeine to keep your ass up here, and then responding to the calls and then the cortisol levels increasing by the minute with these calls. How did you learn to go, I need to lower my cortisol. I need to lower my stress hormones. How did you do it?
So there's almost like a pause because I want to be able to say this in a way that is because it's almost hard for me to admit it.
Don't say anything that'll get you jammed up.
No, it's so just trying to take a deep breath really is a big one. People are like,
Yeah.
oh, it doesn't work. It does.
It
Close
works.
your eyes, 4 or 5 deep breaths, and just saying it's okay. I can literally feel it's almost like a waterfall. I can feel it starting from the top of my head, and it just slowly starts to go down. Right? You'll slowly start to feel better. The other one I've done is when I just feel I'm so overwhelmed. And this is like my when I'm just down the dumps, sad type of thing as well. Video diaries.
Video diaries. Tell me
Video
a little bit about
diaries.
that. I've heard about that, but I've never.
So all I did is I just put my phone on the other camera that faces me, and I stare out the windshield and I just talk.
That's awesome.
That's
awesome.
I may start with, fuck, I'm so mad right now, and it's because of this, and I have a conversation with myself. And the other thing I'll do is I'll act as the other portion of it as well. So I'm mad. Okay, so how can I get over this? What should I do? And I'll just give myself some type of advice to try and talk to myself.
I have a question for you on the video diaries. Do you look back at those videos? Do you record them, one, and do you look back at them and then analyze like what you were going through at that point, and now you can be like, maybe I could have done this differently in that particular situation?
The ones where if it's like I'm upset, I'm just having a bad day, I'm stressed out about something, yes, because I'm almost, and again, I'm very critical of myself, almost disappointed that I may be that upset about something maybe that small. And it just helps me realize, hey, like that situation, really, I can control. I don't need to be that upset.
Yeah.
You're blowing
Whatever
things out of
happened
proportion.
today, the ones where so Christmas this year, Christmas, for those of you who don't know, Christmas in my family it is a huge thing.
Yes.
Right? My dad was Clark Griswold. I lost my dad in 2020 when I was 29. All he wanted to do was be a grandfather. I gave him his first. My sister gave him his second. That's before Ollie was even 1 year old that my dad passed. So at Christmas, I'm at work. I'm not with my kids. I had a fucking day at work.
Yeah.
I called Jen. She's dealing with the kids at my in-laws. So, she really couldn't talk. She's like, what's going on? I'm like, don't worry about it. I don't want to bother you. Hung up the phone. I went and parked. It's dark. I must have cried for 20, 30 minutes. I held myself out of service. I'm like, I can't do this right now. I put the camera on and I talked. I cried. Those ones I won't look at because it's
Of course, it's still fresh.
That's a hard,
Correct.
It's a hard one for
Correct.
me to do it. As I'm talking about, I'm literally tearing up. So, but what I did is in those, I let myself cry. I try and talk to my dad. I try and acknowledge things that maybe I'm holding on to if I feel like I've been a bad parent, which I'm a great parent. I feel sometimes I'm a bad parent. Maybe I didn't handle. I got frustrated at something my kids did, and I didn't like that I got frustrated. So I hold myself to a higher standard. Like that's the type of stuff that I concentrate on.
I think all three of us are great parents. So
I do too.
but like you say, you're more critical of yourself than most people would be of you.
But I'll talk about those things, and then I'll talk about my dad, and I'll just talk about, hey, it's okay, and I'll literally tell myself. At this point, I'll look at the camera. I'll say, it's okay. You're all right. You're not a bad dad. I know you lost dad. You're all right. You know, and I'll sometimes these are almost like 30 minutes long, these videos. But those I do save them. I have them. I feel like what that's enabled me to do is acknowledge those feelings, right? And say it's okay to have these down times. It's okay to be that way. It's okay to have those. But it's okay to be your own best advocate as well. And at that point I was able to call Jen, and she's like, hey, I'm sorry for earlier. I'm like, listen, you don't have to be sorry. Just
she's dealing with her stuff with the kids, and then you're dealing with your own stuff. So she couldn't possibly have known what you were going through at that specific moment.
Right. Being able to talk to her, this is what happened, and she's always like, "Hey, listen, I'm sorry you're going through that, stuff like that." And my answer's always like, "Yeah, it's not your fault. Like, it's all right. It's not your problem." And I mean that in a way where it's not telling her, "Hey, I'm upset because I didn't answer." It's not your problem that I'm dealing with it, but the fact that you're there for me, I appreciate it.
Correct.
Huge.
And then there's people like, well, maybe my wife or my husband isn't there for you or for me in that realm. And if that's the case, being there for yourself, right? We've talked about this in the episode that we weren't able to use. And I'm sure we'll talk about it more because it's actually something I've dealt with, and I still do. My wife yelled at me for it yesterday. Is being your own self-advocate, loving yourself, understanding yourself, not speaking ill of yourself. Those type of things. But I did. This is another Instagram thing that I saw yesterday, just like you said.
You know we're not going to be able to do that once we get video, right?
What's that?
All the faces.
We were just doing it in the background. we might. Who cares?
Anyway.
You see how we are actually what we're doing as we're talking about like some tough conversations.
Your body and your mind, right? Your subconscious and conscious. Even if you're joking and you say, "Oh, I'm fat. I'm an idiot." Blah 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 blah. You will start to believe it whether you think you do or don't. And then you'll find the negatives in your body. You'll find the negatives in your attitude. You'll find the negatives in your life. But if you turn it, this is also a perspective thing as well, right?
It's because your mind doesn't know the difference between reality and your thought.
You're gonna speak that into existence. And this is one of the things you turn around. One of the things that I do love that my dad taught me. He goes, never leave a bathroom without giving yourself a high five or looking yourself in the mirror. And
I like that. It's cheesy, but I like it.
And forever.
I've never heard that, but I might start giving myself a high five.
You never looked at the mirror and go, damn, I look good. Like after you got a haircut or anything?
But a lot of people, what they'll say, they'll look at the mirror and go, I don't like the way this shirt looks. I do it all the time. I'm a big dude. Yeah. I do it all the time. You guys have heard me say it. One of the things I've actually tried, and this is where Jane said,
you're a good-looking big dude.
I was like,
you're a teddy bear.
I'm like, I'm fat. She's like, shut the fuck up.
You really are not, and I've told you this multiple times.
But this is where something. So I grew up. I was bullied, things like that. Actually, you guys don't even know. I don't know if you knew this. I had a eating disorder as.
I'm your best friend. I knew that.
Senior in high school.
I knew that because your wife called me out.
She called me out too.
She called me out big time, and I love you, Jen, for doing that. But we'll talk about that for 2 seconds. Remember, we were joking around with all three of it, and you used to call me Tink Tink and no legs and this and that, and then I think we called you big guy or something like that.
It was at a pool party. At a pool party for Ali and your mother-in-law. Yeah, your mother-in-law.
And your wife came up to us and said, "Hey guys, try being nice to Chris," and we're like,
"No." She actually sent me a text, and I felt a little offended at the time, but I appreciated her for saying something.
100%.
And I felt offended because I was like, man, we joke around like that. If he felt some kind of way. It should have came from him.
Yep.
But I understand why she did it. Obviously, she knows more than we know about you, right?
Right.
So she knows about something that we didn't know, and she's like, "Hey guys, just so you know," and she didn't say it in a bad way either. Like, she was very polite about how she brought it up.
This is, and I'm gonna put it out there. This is then, because now I remember this text, and I might have to go through our chat so I don't fuck it up.
This is Chris's episode. Can you just
No, this is about Chris. This is about Chris.
Oh.
Chris said this. the other
Everybody
day.
loves Chris.
He said something along the lines of, let me see if I can find it. He said something along the lines of, "We'll never have to fucking go through this shit again alone."
Correct.
And-
that was just yesterday. I think we were just
Yeah,
talking about it
I'm
yesterday.
looking for it because it was
I sent something in the chat.
right. But
I sent the picture.
That
in
was
the chat,
his
and
response.
that was his response.
Right,
correct.
that was Chris's response. And I thought that was pretty incredible because, how many times has Chris looked in the mirror and said, "I'm a fat piece of shit. I don't like the way this looks," or whatever. And I would have been like, "Dude, you look great. Dude, I love that
Correct.
shirt."
Right. And that's that whole purpose of that is learning, again, in being your own self-advocate, learning to look at yourself and love yourself for who you are. And if you don't like something, that's fine. I'm not saying you have to accept every bit of yourself. If you feel like a bigger person, okay, well, what changes do you want to make from that? Do you want to do a diet? You're going to work out? You're going to do that? But don't speak ill of yourself, because at the end of the day, there's one person that needs to truly, truly love you, and that's you.
correct.
And that's where those self videos. Now the whole point of that is that self video, right? If you can validate yourself, if you can talk to yourself, if you can show yourself love in the hardest moments that you're going to have, everyone else that you have is you're going to be able to back you up. But you're going to be the general to your own army versus having somebody else try and pull your wagon type of thing. You know what I mean? You're going to be able to carry yourself with others through those hard times. And then when the easy times are there, it's even better.
Correct. And read what I sent, and then his response.
You sent that picture of Batman that said, "I passed my hardest moments alone," while everyone believed that was fine.
Which was true in my case.
Right.
And obviously, that's
This is before we had-
correct. This is before I even met you guys. This is before being a police officer. This is before any of that.
You said, "This is how I felt, and why I believe the podcast was a great idea. No one should have to go through trauma alone. Have a blessed day, fellas. We all loved it." And Chris wrote, "Proud of you, homie. Best part is none of us have to do that again." And I was like, holy shit. Like, you know what that's like to hear that as a guy, to know that you always, like, I've always been around people. Can we call them best friends? No, you and actually somebody. Let's just leave it alone.
Nah,
you
say it.
told me,
You have a number one best friend, brother, man.
You and my boy Matt.
You have a number one, according to him.
You and my boy Matt have always said the same thing. You said, stop fucking feeling, or stop making people feel like they're your best friends. The smaller your group, the better it is. Right?
Quality over quantity.
Quality over
Always.
quantity. And I would like to say I have a pretty solid group of guys, which most of you are in that group too, of guys who we've become closer friends. Most of them in our class. But how the fuck do you talk about these really scary topics that society has made really scary, and opening up and being vulnerable about what you've gone through? And how do we normalize, you just lost your fucking dad?
Something like this.
You have
Podcast.
every right in the world to feel the way you felt. You went through your things. You have every right in the world to feel how you feel. So why should somebody who's been on the outside and has never been through what you've been through decided to go, wow, that's fucking weird.
Yeah.
Why do you fucking feel that way? You should speak to somebody. You should talk to somebody. Something's wrong. Like, why would you take those words from somebody else and hold them dear to heart?
Yeah.
You know, and that's kind of why I feel like when I use the word normal, I'm not talking about normal as in something that needs to be solidified, right? Some kind of concrete thing. It's what society seems to be like typical, right? What is a typical reaction to something like that?
But nobody should tell you how you should react. Nobody should tell you how you should feel.
But the problem is,
Nobody should dictate
not everybody has this
how
little
you
group.
behave.
Not everybody has this little group, which is why I think this podcast is going to touch people's lives for the better.
Well, they didn't have that group because, right, when we were, especially when we were growing up, and even now, it still wasn't a thing where
Correct.
okay, let's be able to openly talk and do. And but some of the things I want to touch on, like I had, I sent these questions to you guys.
Yes, you did. And what was my answer? I was like, holy shit. Those questions are crazy.
So we'll get to those, with you guys as well.
That should just be a whole nother podcast on its own. Just answering those questions. Yeah, just answering those questions should be like a whole episode on its own. Because those questions are heavy.
Yeah.
Like that is something that you're gonna have to take some time.
You have to sit down
today, correct.
and
You have to
truly
think
look at
about it.
yourself and
You have to
figure
think
those out.
about those answers.
And I
Like,
think those answers, like even though listeners are going to go, "Holy shit, we'll give them a little tease." The first question is, "What's your biggest failure?"
that's huge. Like I don't know that I can think of
It's
right
almost
now.
like it's like, remember the bios when we did that, when we got to the recruit training and they ask you, and like jobs too, what are your strengths and your weaknesses? And everybody puts for weaknesses,
Superman, bitch.
I care.
Yeah,
I care too much.
I don't have.
I'm too passionate. I work too hard.
There's a lot of people that said I don't have a weakness in our class, and
Yep.
they used to call them out. They're
Yeah.
like, "Oh, so you don't have weaknesses?" And
All
that
right.
was quick. That's the thing. Like
Yep.
you have to be honest with yourself. We all have weaknesses, and we all have failures. But now to pick in those failures to think about which one was the biggest failure, that takes a lot of thought.
Yep.
Like you have to know what you're looking for to deem that specific one your biggest failure.
What truly changed you?
Correct.
To make
How did that
other
impact?
changes
Correct.
and to better yourself, and that's going to be a huge one.
I'm going to tell you something, and then we can kind of start to dwindle down this incredible podcast, because we do want
This
to keep
episode was amazing.
It's awesome. I love it. I mean, I could do this all day.
Yes, you can.
Hearing your stories and listening to you guys and listening to myself sometimes.
Yeah, like mostly yourself, but yeah.
Thanks, Angel. I think it's incredibly important to be vulnerable when you answer those questions.
Yes.
Yep.
Because I think that what are your biggest failures? Sometimes so many thoughts pop up that you're just like, holy shit, they're overwhelming.
Yeah.
They're overwhelming.
And it doesn't mean it's anything that's bad. To feel
No.
that isn't something you should be like, "Oh my god, I'm such a bad." No, you're not a bad
Just
person. You didn't do
recognizing.
anything wrong. Just these may be things that you haven't thought about. You could say, "Okay, well, here's why I did it, but what changes could I have made while doing that?" And it just but that's where that's self-reflective.
Yeah. Dude, I think it's awesome. You talking a little bit about your
Upbringing.
your upbringing.
Yeah.
Your video chats.
Your
talking about
video
wife.
journals.
I think the other thing I want to kind of throw out, almost like a disclaimer, right? Again, my parents worked very hard. My dad was a farmer. My mom worked for a not-for-profit. So at the beginning of my life, I didn't have a lot of money. By the time I went to go graduate high school, my dad did radio sales, like advertisement spaces. And my mom worked for an eyewear company and was a manager. My parents did well. They worked hard. They showed me perseverance. They showed me dedication. They showed me what it is to really, really sacrifice and do. I had two very loving parents who would do everything for me. So, part of this almost sounds bad for the first part, but the whole part of this podcast is talking about the hard,
Correct.
the hard things and admitting and talking and same thing, with talking about my kids. I'll die for those little fuckers. I'll do whatever I need to do.
I'll die for those kids too.
To keep them alive. The thing I'm most critical about myself, and I always will be, and you two know this, and my wife knows, everybody else, is how I am as a parent, how I am as a father.
Yeah.
I only want what's best for those boys, and the fact that I've been able to really learn very early on, and I'm now super critical of every single moment and every single teaching I have with those kids. I think that's one of my the thing I am the hardest on myself, and the thing that will get me down the most. But it's what I'm the most proud of, is how I try to continuously change and continuously learn so that I can teach them to be the best kids they can be and give them the most love that they can get. And Luke Combs has a new song that's out. I forget the fucking name of it. Front Door Famous. Talks about when you come home, there's no greatest thing than hearing your kids run up and yell, "Daddy." Every single day when I get home, well, not every day because now I work into the night. But when it was before that and I got home,
Nice,
Wow.
Matthias.
That's very loud.
Nice.
That was the part of front door affairs.
That's supposed to
they'll
come out on my
run
phone.
up and I hear "Daddy," and I get the biggest. And now, like when they have outbursts, they have things. I don't yell at them. We don't punish. We don't hit our kids, anything like that. We talk, and that's something I wish I had.
Yeah.
But that's why I'm so proud of my dad, is because my dad did the best he could and taught me how to be self-critical, how to be this person, and how to change myself, and how to be very passionate. Just like you two, I wear my heart on my sleeve, and I think that sometimes my wife hates that because I don't shut the fuck up about a lot of things. And if there's an issue, we're gonna, and this is where our slogan for the podcast comes in. We're gonna talk about it.
Talk about it.
And I don't care how uncomfortable it is. I don't care what problems it makes, because that's how you get rid of the problems.
And I think communication is a big part of life.
Yep.
I think when you communicate, and the more open you are about what's going on, the clearer your message is going to be, the clearer the receiver is going to receive the intended message,
Yep.
and the clearer the situation is going to be, because there should be no misunderstanding. I'm communicating what's happening
Yep.
so that we can talk about it.
And it may make the water a little more murky. Like, let's say
At the beginning,
you're trying to fix something, right? You take out a dirty filter. All of those particles that were sucked in and out are going to go out into the water. Now
Yeah.
your water's all murky. You put in a new filter. Well, what ends up happening? It cleans it up. Now you
cleans
don't
it up.
have the problem
Correct.
anymore. And I think if I could have one takeaway from my portion of the podcast, something that I am very thankful for,
talk about it.
is being able to talk about it.
That's
Is
it.
being able to have the two of you and other people. There's guys at my job who I've become open with, and I talk to them, and they've communicated their problems. And I've had one buddy, he's called me at 3 a.m. crying. He's like, I never thought I'd be able to do that with somebody. I'm like, listen, man, I'm always here. And I'm so proud of him for doing that. And he's a young kid for doing that.
Well, I'm proud of you because you made him feel comfortable enough for him to be able to do that.
And I think that that's the whole key. Like you just said, we need to talk about it. Communication needs to be open. Communicating, being able to talk to somebody. If you're needing to keep these things in, you need to get them out. We need to talk. You need to talk, whether it's to yourself, the video diaries.
Yeah.
I would love it for people to just be like, hey, even in Instagram, or hey, I tried it and I hated it. But you know what you did? You tried it.
I don't know. I
You know
think
what?
I'm going to try it, to be honest.
Therapists highly recommend it, man. Therapists highly recommend the video recording because they see you in an emotional state. And a lot of problems are, from their explanation to me, sitting through therapy sessions, is that they don't think they're ever going to come down from that, like that high-strung feeling, or they're going to continue to always feel sad, or they're going to continue to always feel angry, or whatever. And when you see that diary and when you make it true, like, I'm fucking angry, I'm tired, or I'm sad, I'm this and that, and then you watch the video again, it's like, wow, that's not really who I am.
Right.
Those are just some of the emotions that I have as a human being,
Yep.
right? Human conditioning is what we call it.
And I think the best thing, in our unsolicited parenting advice, one of the best things I've learned, because you talk about communication with your kids and what I wish my parents did, right?
Yeah.
To help me. If I make a mistake with my kids, or maybe I handled a situation in a way that I wasn't particularly proud of, or I wasn't happy I did, I will walk up. This is the same thing. Communicate. They may be young, but I'm communicating. Walk up and I say, listen, buddy, Daddy's sorry that I handled it that way. I know I tell you not to yell and anything like that, or to talk to me. I'm sorry that I handled it that way. And one of the things that I've actually seen in my young kid is he'll walk, if kids get mad, they walk up and he'll, Dad, I'm not going to go do this. I'm like, hey, buddy, please don't speak to me that way. We're going to go do something else. He will walk up and he goes, Dad, I'm sorry. I reacted that way. Because
Awesome.
what's he learning how to do?
Yeah, he's learning from
He's
you.
learning
Yeah,
how
correct.
to take control. He's learning how to recognize his emotions, and he's learning how to hold himself accountable.
Accountable. That's it. Accountability
Awesome.
at an early age, at a very, very
Awesome.
early age.
It's awesome.
That's awesome. Man, guys, I think this was a great episode. You know,
I enjoyed
know
it
you
very
guys-
much.
I can't wait to hopefully hear a little feedback from people,
Yeah.
about whatever, hopefully on social media. Make sure you follow us, Another Cost Mentality. We're starting to really pick this thing up and record more. I know that an hour is a long time for a podcast, but, at least for these first couple episodes, they might go to an hour with our personal stories. And then obviously we want to hear your stories. Reach out to us if you want to be on the show, whatever topic, we'll talk about it.